Welcome back to Getting Caught Up. Had a chance to speak with Brittany Patterson. You may remember Brit from a recent viral story about her that made national headlines. Brit is a Georgia woman who was arrested in front of her 4 children in late October of 2024, was dragged to jail where she was fingerprinted and had her mugshot taken, and then was charged with reckless conduct before being released on bond. Brit is facing up to a year in prison and as much as a $1,000 fine, all for having allowed her 10-year-old son to walk to the store by himself for a distance of less than a mile in a small town with a population of less than 400. And Brit is making a stand, fighting the reckless conduct charge and refusing to sign a so-called safety plan that local authorities want her to agree to. It's a story that should at least make all parents do a double take, if not scare them outright. So I asked Brit all about the day she was arrested, what life is like in Mineral Bluff, Georgia, what the reaction from friends and family has been, her thoughts on government overreach, how her kids have been handling the ordeal, and if she's prepared to go to jail fighting the reckless conduct charge. Joining Brit for the conversation was David DeLugas, her lawyer and the founder of ParentsUSA, a group that advocates for parents' rights as protected by the U.S. Supreme Court. David discussed the legal nuances of Brit's case and others like hers. Surprisingly, this sort of thing happens more than you might think. Quick reminder, please give this episode a like, share, or comment to help with its visibility so I can keep bringing you conversations with interesting people like Brit Patterson. It was a fascinating discussion with Brit. She is just an everyday mom who has a terrible situation looming over her head. And I think you'll find her poise and wisdom throughout all of this to be nothing short of impressive. So here she is from the small town of Mineral Bluff, Georgia, Brit Patterson. Brit Patterson, hello. And
Hey there.
David DeLugas, Executive Director of ParentsUSA and Brit's lawyer, welcome to the podcast. It's good to have you here. How are we both doing today?
Thanks for having us.
Life's good. Let's
Good.
get some justice going in America.
Yes. Well, I wanted to talk to you, Brit, because I've been talking. The story it blew up. It went viral. It's about 6 weeks ago now. It went viral. I talked to my wife a lot about this. Talked to my friends. We were all shocked about it. We were just really shocked with how crazy and over the line it all seemed. And so, I wonder just to start off here, what the reaction has been in your life from friends, from family, the general public, at work. How's this been for you? And what are people saying to you?
It's kind of like you were just saying, it's been overwhelmingly positive. There's been a few things that not said to me directly, but just that I've seen, comments online that were negative, but I'd say 99% positive, overwhelmingly. So I've got a lot of support from the local community. I've actually, just yesterday, I got another card in the mail from somebody I don't know, just, Christmas card, words of support. I've been getting emails, text messages. So it's been, for the most part, positive.
Well, that's good to hear. So no negative effects really, other than just having to go through this legal process now and having been
Yeah.
arrested and going through all that. That's good to
Yeah.
hear. So I sort of want to start at life in Mineral Bluff, Georgia. What's it like there? Tell people, what the town is like. I know it's small town. It's sort of small town USA, right?
It is, yeah. And I mean, it's a four-way stop. So we live, less than a mile from downtown Mineral Bluff. It's real, it's not even really much of a town. It's post office, the fire station, Dollar General, gas station, and like little bitty post office, little bitty gas station. It's mainly just, a four-way stop that gets you to somewhere else. So
Right. And it's
um,
like northern Georgia, just to put it into perspective.
yeah, we're only about, they call it the tri-state area. We're about maybe 15 miles from Tennessee in one direction and about 10 miles from North Carolina in another direction. So we're about as far north in Georgia as you can go.
So rural, and also not many people there, right? It's like small population, like less than 400 people live there. Is that right?
Yeah, in the actual little town of Mineral Bluff, I mean, the county as a whole has more people, but still, I mean, it's very small for an entire county. So, but yeah, actual within the city limits of Mineral Bluff is not very many people at all.
Okay. So small town. So that's sort of the backdrop for all this. And then on October 30th, your son goes out for a walk to the store, less than 1 mile. And
Yep.
seems like all hell breaks loose after that. Somebody calls 911 and sees him. And then
Hmm.
you get a call from the cops. Police show up at your door, arrest you.
Hmm.
Tell me about that. What are the series of circumstances that allowed this to happen?
Well, I mean, so my younger daughter and Soren both homeschool, and pretty much anytime I have to run an errand, take another kid to an appointment, I just let them decide if they want to come with me or if they want to stay at home. So like on this particular day, I thought they were both going to go with me, but when I went back in and yelled for Soren and I just kind of looked up the stairs, looked over in the kitchen. I didn't really, go explore for him much. He didn't answer, so I just kind of figured that he didn't want to come, that he, was playing in the woods or something. So I just got in the car with my other daughter, went and picked up my other son from school and took him to his appointment. And Soren just decided to walk into town while I was gone.
Right. And
So
he made that decision, right? But he also
yeah.
has your father is there. So
Mhm.
it's not like he was just totally unsupervised, right?
No, I mean, yeah, my dad's always here, so there's always an adult in the home, but he didn't, ask my dad or anything like that. He just decided he wanted to go to the store. He knows how to get there. And so he went.
Yeah. So
Andrew, may I jump in because one of
absolutely.
the concerns I have nationally, not just for Brit and her case, is what and it's understandable why. So I'm not saying this by way of criticism. It's you pointed out, well, a grandfather's there, so it's not as if he's unsupervised. So here's the question. It's a rhetorical question. Why does he need to be supervised? Why does a child at any particular age need to be supervised unless they are incapable of taking care of themselves? So clearly, an infant should be supervised, or when you put an infant into their crib and let them take a nap, they're supervised because you're somewhere in the house, but they're also not going to get up and walk down to the store because they're 12 months old. On the other hand, Soren, who's nearly 11, he doesn't need to be supervised. So the idea that you even mention, well, grandpa's there, he's not unsupervised. He doesn't need to be. And just legally, it's not law, but it is the Division of Family and Children's Services guidelines for Georgia literally say children between 9 and 12 can be unsupervised, left alone for up to 2 hours. So there's a guideline. Now, as a lawyer and a constitutional lawyer at that, uh, I'm glad they're willing to give us permission, us parents permission to let our children be unsupervised for 2 hours. But that's a guideline. And point being, only the parent of a particular child knows their physical, intellectual, emotional ability to be unsupervised. Many parents would say, I don't want my 17-year-old to be unsupervised, worried about what they might do. On the other hand, my 8-year-old goes in the kitchen, can cook, handle things, he knows what to do. He's trained in first. I don't worry about my 8-year-old. So these guidelines are, again, by the Division Family Children Services, DFACS, out there. But I would like to get our society away from this idea that children not supervised 24/7 somehow are at peril. And we can't allow that. In fact, there's an
Right.
organization. There's reasons to say they should be left alone and they should be allowed more freedom, but I'll let you go there. I just wanted to.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, and I didn't mean to be critical in any way there. I'm just
Oh,
trying to paint the picture of this is how it was. Like even
Mhm.
if you have that 2 hour window, right, that the state allows for 9 to 12 year olds to be unsupervised, theoretically he was still supervised for a
Technically, he
while there.
wasn't. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So so your father's there, and also I imagine that, like, and like David said, not only is he 10 years, I mean, he's on the cusp of being 11. I know he's turned 11 since. So
Yeah,
he's
he was a few days away from being 11.
Right. So he's really an 11-year-old.
He'd been telling everybody he was 11 for 6 months already. You know how kids are.
Right. They always want to move up to the next age. Got that.
Yeah.
So, and I'm assuming too that this is familiar territory for him. This is maybe not even the first time he's taken such a walk. So
it was the first time that I'm aware of that he went. But we drive to the post office all the time, so they all know how to get there.
Sure, and I meant not even by himself, but he's done it before with an adult. It's not like he just was out exploring the frontier, right, of Mineral Bluff.
I mean, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
But but again, like, that's not uncommon. My mom just lives right through the woods. There's plenty of times my kids will walk over there and they don't ask permission because they don't need to.
Yeah.
They'll go, back in the woods and play, or they'll be off riding their dirt bikes. And I mean, they don't have to ask me to go get on their dirt bike and go for a ride. So for me, this was just kind of an instance of where he didn't ask permission, but I would have preferred him to let me know or to ask, but it's not like I, really require it. I would just prefer it.
Right. Understood. So the 911 caller sees him, is concerned for some reason, and then the cops pick him up and bring him home. Is that what happened?
Yeah. Well, in the report, it said that she thought he was 7, which was way off. But David will say that doesn't matter.
Sure.
I will say that.
Yeah, and it doesn't, but regardless, the initial reason that she was concerned was way off base. Because obviously he's much older than that, but, and probably he is homeschooled. So I think it was a Wednesday, and, it was the middle of the school day. So maybe, she thought that was odd, but it doesn't, regardless, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He wasn't vandalizing anything. He wasn't stealing anything. He wasn't, skipping down the middle of the yellow line in the middle of the road. So really, he wasn't in any distress or anything like that. So, I can kind of get saying, hey kid, it's the middle of the day. Are you okay? And which she did, asked him if he was okay, asked him if he needed help. And he said he was fine and he did not need help. So I don't really I'm just guess I'm struggling to understand why then you still, would call the police if.
Oh, so I didn't realize that she actually, so it was a woman, we know that she actually spoke to your son.
Yeah. Yeah, she did.
And sort of investigated.
She kind of, sat there and watched him. She watched him go into the Dollar General. Then she said she watched him go across the street to the gas station because his best friend's grandma works there. So he told me he was going to go see if she was working. And then he came back over to the post office and was going to head back home at that point, and she was sitting there in her car. And he said that's when she asked him those questions. And then she started to ask him another question, and he kind of just didn't feel right about talking to her. Maybe he remembered I'm not supposed to talk to strangers or something. But whatever it was, like, he just didn't, want to answer her questions anymore. And so he kind of ran off. And then that's when she called the police.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you know what I'm wondering? Do you have any idea? This is such a small town. You have no idea who this person was?
No, like I said, that Mineral Bluff is kind of an intersection where you can head one way and go to Tennessee, or you can head the other way and go to North Carolina. So there is a lot of people coming from North Carolina or coming from Tennessee who go through that intersection. So like, I don't know everybody that goes through that intersection, obviously.
Right.
And the county as a whole is bigger than just Mineral Bluff, and a lot of people that live other places in the county go through that intersection. And I don't know everybody that lives in the county. So I know a lot of people, but I don't know everybody. And so I don't know this young lady.
And do you think you'll ever find out? I suppose that you might never find out who did this, right?
Oh, I know who she is. Yeah. I mean, it was in the report, but I don't, that's how I know that I don't know her.
Okay.
Because I know her name and I know where she lives, because that was all in the report, but I don't know her.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you come home I guess you get a call first explaining what happened, right?
Yeah, yeah, I got a call and told me that they'd found him in Mineral Bluff, which I say that kind of sarcastically because he was fine. He didn't need a search and rescue. Um,
I haven't
but
heard that term before, but that's good. I like
that
it.
one just flew out today, David. Sorry.
No,
But
it's good.
but yeah, I mean, I was at the doctor with my other son, and so, naturally I'm first of all just kind of flustered and don't know what to think. I'm getting a call by the police. I didn't know he was in Mineral Bluff, but now I'm getting called by the police. So I think anytime, you get a call from the police, you just kind of immediately, you know, freeze or don't know what to say or don't know what to think. And I think that was definitely kind of the situation. But anyway, she ended up bringing him back to the house before I got back to the house. It was about a 20 minutes before I got back to the house. And dropped him off, with my dad because my dad was still here. And then they left. So I've kind of made it important to point out after I thought about it for a while, because, as the days went on and at this point, as the weeks go on, I kind of think about it and analyze the situation more. And they left him in the same situation that I did.
Right.
They left him at home with just my dad here. And it's not like they stayed until I got home or
Right.
anything like that. They left him. So,
Yeah. So, and then you get home, okay, and
mhm.
to your surprise, two police officers show up at the door and they're there to
It was
arrest
several hours later. It was
several
like
hours.
5 hours later. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I got home and I had a conversation with Soren, about if he's going to leave the property, I need you to let me know. And that's the rule with all my kids.
Yeah.
You need to ask, you need to let me know. Um, and so I just kind of like to keep tabs on them that way.
Yeah.
But and he didn't. And so, we had a conversation about that. And but then we went about our day. My other son still had wrestling practice. I still had work I had to do. So, it was 5 hours later, and I was in the middle of a phone call with a client when they came knocking at my door. So we just kind of, thought that was the end of it. I didn't think I'd hear from them again. And so we just kind of,
So you were
went.
shocked when they were there, when they told you they were there to arrest you.
Yeah, well, they didn't even say that. They just told me to turn around and put my hands behind my back. That
Yeah.
was the first thing they said after they said they needed me to step outside. So,
Hey, Brittany, I need you to come out. No, not 1 second. I need you to come out. All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Is there someone else for the kids? No. Huh? No, there's nobody here. Okay, turn around for me. Kid, you're under arrest. For what? For the incident we talked about earlier today. What am I under arrest for? For reckless endangerment. And how was I recklessly endangering my child? So call mommy and tell them you're taking the deal because you decided to walk down the street. That's not his fault. Yeah, hold on. You're the mother. That's your responsibility to pick up your child. Not talk to me, please. That's being smart. Okay. Next time I checked, it wasn't illegal for a kid to walk to the store. It is when they're 10 years old. It is? Yes. Okay, I'd like to see that. Okay, well, you'll see it on your form. I need somebody here to stay with the kids. I don't know about it.
Do you want to take swatch off?
Okay, well, then I'm calling defense. Sorry, come here.
Very good, take that. She won't be my knife.
Come here. No, I want you to call Mark. Hey, come here, let me talk to her. Can you hear me? The police are here and they're taking me to jail. So I need you to come stay with the kids. No, I'm not. They're taking me to jail. I love you. Love you too, baby. Keep going.
Call Daddy and tell him they're taking me to jail. Marmy will be here in a minute. Marmy will be here in a minute. Okay? All right. Love you guys.
Love you. Bye. When will you be back?
Who knows?
Go faster side. This side. Okay. Will you buckle her, Kevin? Alright, so if you'll slide all the way to the edge of the seat because the seat buckle is under you. Do the side. Good.
Did you at any point did you consider when you sort of realized then what was going on? Did you consider like going back into the house and trying to resist the arrest, or were you?
No, because what would that have accomplished for my kids?
Yeah,
all that would have done was make the whole thing even more dramatic than it already was, and that was only going to further traumatize my children. So I would think that most mothers in that kind of situation would be, I'm kind of thinking about my kids and how are they thinking? What are they feeling? What can I do to make this as, painless as possible, if that's even possible. So yeah, me resisting or getting thrown to the ground or whatever would have happened, in that situation, it wouldn't have done anything to make anything better. So it wasn't even worth it.
Yeah. I was pretty surprised at just how sort of poised you remained in that whole situation.
Well, that was why, that was why, because all of my kids were here. Soren was sitting right here in the office with me. So he, was here right when they came to the door. The other kids were upstairs, so they had to, come down. But yeah, I just, first thing I thought of was my kids. I knew I was going to jail at that point. I mean, they put handcuffs on you, you're going to jail. There's no getting out of handcuffs that I'm aware of. So it really it wouldn't have accomplished anything. Even if I would have tried to resist, I was still going to jail.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have changed anything.
Yeah. So once you're and I wanted to just ask you have 4 children, right? So you have 4 children, mm-hmm. and Soren's the youngest, 11, and how old's the oldest?
16.
Okay.
So they're roughly every 2 years apart. So
yeah. And so they're witnessing this whole thing.
Yes.
And then you get taken away. You get to the police station. What happens there? I guess it's a usual arrest. They fingerprint you, they take your mugshot. Is that what happened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it was a county jail, and it's just a little bitty jail. So I was just in the booking room the whole time. I wasn't put in a cell or anything like that, but yeah, I still had to, strip down and put on jail clothes. I was fingerprinted, mugshot taken. They had like a body scanner thing that I had to stand on and do that. But the rest of the time, I just sat there on the bench and answered some questions that they were typing into the computer and just kind of waited to see what was going to happen.
So they took the mugshot. First of all, I'm wondering, have you used the mugshot to like update your profile pics on social media? Like
no. I do look good in orange. It's one of my favorite colors. But
orange jumpsuit.
Yeah, more of a burnt orange, not that particular orange.
That's a bright fluorescent orange, probably. Right?
Yeah. But
and Britt, since you're in Georgia and after Georgia just played the University of Texas in football.
Yeah, it wasn't good.
Yeah, and their color is burnt orange. Maybe we hold off.
You're wearing the rivals' colors. Yeah. So when you're answering questions, though, you don't have a lawyer present. And did they ever read you your rights? Watching the video, I don't recall them reading you any Miranda rights.
No, when they took me to jail, I did not know why I was being arrested, even though I asked twice. And I didn't see a warrant, and I was not read my rights. So.
Yeah. Strange. So when you're there, what do you think? How much time did you actually spend there then?
It was roughly an hour and a half, but when you're sitting there, not knowing what's going to happen, and you're just watching that clock, I mean, it felt like several hours.
Yeah. And what are you thinking at that point and feeling?
Everything. Just kind of like a just crazy thoughts like, what's going to happen? I wonder what my kids are doing. I don't know what's going on. Am I going to have to stay here overnight? I mean, just all kinds
Yeah.
of different thoughts.
And
And
did they allow you to make a phone call? Did they give you like that one phone call?
no,
So how did you end up getting out then?
because uh, I told my kids while I was being walked
Yeah.
down to the car to call their dad.
Yeah.
And my family's fairly connected. My father-in-law is a post commissioner. And so we know the sheriff, we know the DA, we know everybody. So my family started making some phone calls. And so after about an hour, a little over an hour in the jail, I was on a speakerphone call with the sheriff, with the two booking deputies. And he said that I was going to be released, that I just had to do a little $500 lien on my property, and that we would sort this all out tomorrow, is what he said. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. And just to back up for a second, your husband, he actually works way out of town. He doesn't work just out of town. He's like halfway across the country, or more than halfway across the country in Montana, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So he must have been shocked by what was going on.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah.
My son said that when he first called him, he thought he was playing a joke on him.
Yeah. I could see how he might
So,
think that. But then he
yeah.
realized it wasn't. He made the calls, you get out.
Yeah.
Okay. So you come home
Exactly.
and how do you get connected to David? I mean, you don't have a lawyer at this point still, I guess, right?
No, I mean, based on what the sheriff had initially told me, we'll work it out tomorrow. I guess I kind of naively thought that that might actually happen. So I gave it all day Thursday and never heard anything. And then I pretty much told my husband, I said, if I don't hear anything by noon on Friday, then I'm just going to go ahead and get an attorney. And so I started doing some research, and I just happened to stumble upon the case just north of me, the next town. Well, actually, it's east, but the next town past ours is Blairsville, and David had represented a lady there a couple years ago with almost an identical situation. Same reckless conduct charge, involving her kids, and he represented her, and they were successful. So I just reached out to him.
And David, what did you think? You when you heard, I mean, had you heard about this yet, or was Brit's outreach to you your first inkling of the case?
I had not heard about it. I wasn't shocked or surprised that this happened yet again in Georgia. It happened in Waco, Texas, that I know of, in Silver Springs, Maryland, up in New York. It happens around the country. I'm not blasé about it. I'm just resigned to the fact that police are going to substitute their own judgment about what should and shouldn't happen as far as parenting, and as well that the judicial system, the prosecution of these cases is just routine because most parents don't push back. They capitulate. They tend to apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize I'd done something wrong. When in fact they didn't do anything wrong. They
Yeah.
shouldn't apologize. The police should mind their own business and step away unless a child is hurt, is in distress, or is in a situation where there's imminent risk of real harm. So when she called me, I was like, well, I happen to be quite familiar with Georgia's laws in this regard and around the country, but in Georgia, and it's mere coincidence that our national office, our only office, is in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm a licensed Georgia attorney, so this is right up my alley. But the particular statute she's been charged with violating, and this is where it gets really incredibly bad. That statute in 1997 was held unconstitutional by the Georgia Supreme Court. And yet, law enforcement in 2020 arrested the mom to whom Brit referenced nearby, arrested her under the same charge. 2.5 years afterwards, a judge finally granted a motion I had filed, pointing out that this statute's unconstitutional and shouldn't be applied. And the judge, a former assistant district attorney and, has that mindset of the prosecution's office, maybe is more right than the defense attorneys. Reluctantly, I believe, granted that motion. But the point is, when Britt called me, I was like, well, here we go again.
Yeah. Now, Britt, I said that you were poised in that arrest video in the body cam footage, but I did notice you didn't, it doesn't sound like you apologized at any point. Did you, like David was just saying, did you say you were sorry at any point? No, there's
No,
nothing to be sorry about, right?
no, I was furious. I
Yeah.
was steaming on the inside. So don't let my calm exterior fool you. I mean,
Right.
I was shocked. I couldn't believe they were, trying to arrest me for that, but I was also very angry.
Yeah.
Mostly not so much at the fact of getting arrested, because kind of like David, those kind of silly things don't surprise me. I was mostly upset that they came to my home and did it in front of my children.
Yeah.
So
Right.
yeah, I was not going to apologize.
Right. And I wanted to ask you, so one thing that struck me about all this too is I wondered, Mineral Bluff, it just seems like maybe there's very low crime, not a lot going on for the police. And I realize this might be speculative, but is it possible that the police and the judge and the district attorney were just bored that day and needed something to do, and this gave them like a little something to do? That's how I read it at first. I was like, they are bored and just have
I
nothing.
honestly don't know. And it's the county. So there is no police department for Mineral Bluff. It was the county sheriff.
Okay.
But even in the county as a whole, I mean, if you read the weekly paper, the majority of our crime is people driving with suspended license or, drug related things, stuff like that. As far as violent crime, it happens, but it's not like it's commonplace.
It's rare.
So even the county as a whole I've always considered it a very safe place to live.
Yeah. And then that's the other thing too, is we've got, I looked at I looked at the arrest warrant, and it was signed by a judge and I guess signed by the prosecutor. Is that right, David? The DA?
Not exactly, and I don't fault you for not understanding the way that particular document is framed. It's a form, of course, and it's an application for a warrant for arrest, and the applicant or the prosecutor is actually the deputy.
Okay.
So police officers or deputies can fill out that form, attest to it under oath that the facts being alleged or the crime being alleged to have occurred is true, and then the magistrate judge should review it. Perhaps the judge ought to know that that statute has been held unconstitutional and not sign off on it. That would have been better.
Yeah.
But magistrate judges, I'm speaking generically, not about this particular judge, they tend to take the word of the law enforcement officer who comes before them and under oath says, I believe a crime has been committed. Here's the statute that I believe has been violated, and here are the facts that support. The facts, of course, are not very detailed and they're very generic. It's just enough to get the arrest warrant signed in order to go arrest the person. Now, by the way, there are many instances where people are arrested around the country without a warrant. Those are the same thing. They are arrests. They're handcuffed. They're fingerprinted. They're booked. The mom in Waco, Texas, charged with child endangerment under Texas law, went through the exact same process without an arrest warrant, based solely on a deputy at her door saying, and I quote you from the body cam, I have a child. I wouldn't have let him walk home, and told her to turn around, cuffed her, and took her in. So it's an unfortunate series of events. And let me comment earlier when you were speculating about where the prosecuting attorney's office, the magistrate judge, and the deputy board and didn't really have anything to do that day. The answer is there's no, and Britt's correct, there's no way to know what process they went through or the deputy went through. I don't know if the deputy consulted with the district attorney for Fannin County or the assistant district attorney, or the deputy checked with the sheriff. We have reasonably likely not, or went to the magistrate directly. But the way the arrest warrant is written. It's the deputy is the prosecuting person. The magistrate signs it.
Got it. So it's at least two people that thought this was a good idea, but possibly more.
Yes, certainly. It's possible that the district attorney's office was consulted in some way. And the district attorney's office in Fannin County, which is a particular judicial district in Georgia that encompasses more than one county, it's that rural. So based on population, if you're in Metro Atlanta, the judicial district for Fulton County or even Cobb County, those have their own prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's offices up in North Georgia encompass 2 or 3 counties, again, because of the population and scope. So it's a different county than and prosecutor's office than the one over in Union County, Georgia, which is the case that Brit found where ParentsUSA and I represented the mother in that case. They went through, well, the only difference in that case was they called her and said, hey, we have an arrest warrant. Would you come down to the jail? She didn't come fast enough for their purposes, so they drove up to her house and arrested her around the corner at the residence from where her kids were standing before they put the handcuffs on, and then put her in the back seat of a patrol car. But at least they gave her the courtesy of a phone call saying.
And that was like a week later, wasn't it, David?
It was. It was 6 days after the event where a 4-year-old had slipped away from the family home and went across the street in a very, very rural subdivision and to play with his buddy, and the neighbor's mom called the police, which is absurd, but that's another question.
Yeah, that is. Okay, so let's get to sort of the potential resolution to this, and that is the safety plan that they're offering, I guess, for you to sign. Is it even an offer? Are they sort of pressuring you? What's happening there?
There's no offer. It was just they called and said and by they, I mean the Department of Family and Children's Services, the caseworker that came out, she called and said that she wanted to go over a safety plan. And when she had left my house a few days before, she said that I probably, wouldn't hear from her again, that she wanted to have it off her desk in 30 days. And then next thing I know, I'm getting a call to go over a safety plan. So, naturally, I'm like, well, what changed? Why do I need this safety plan? I never heard of one before, so I didn't know anything about it or what it was. So, then of course I called David and I'm like, do you know what this is? What is this? What does it mean? And so he kind of told me about what it was and what it meant. And, even without talking to David, I probably wasn't going to sign it. But then once it was kind of explained to me what it was, I definitely wasn't going to sign it. Because first of all, it was ridiculous. They wanted me to download a tracking app on his phone, which is great. But, listen, especially, I mean, David will tell you other reasons, but we don't have great cell phone reception up here. There's plenty of places up here where you don't even get service. So you couldn't track your kids if you wanted to.
And the biggest reason on that, Andrew, is this. A safety plan suggests by its very title that her child was unsafe to begin with, which he wasn't. And the safety plan also suggests that the terms of that safety plan will make the child more safe, which it wouldn't, because even if you do download a device, an app to his device, even if he remembers to carry it with him, even if it's fully charged, even if cell service is adequate, while he's out and about, he doesn't drop it or set it down and forget it, which again, kids do, adults do. So let's face it. Even if all of that's true, knowing where your child's phone or device is, which presumably means you know where your child is, knowing where he is doesn't make him more safe.
Right.
Okay. It just means you know where he is. So that's one of it. And if you'll indulge me, to be clear, because there is a lot of speculation or assumption about, oh, it's a safety plan. Why wouldn't any parent sign a safety plan? What's wrong with the mom? Nothing's wrong with the mom. It's what I just explained, and she pointed out about cell service. But again, it's government saying this makes your child more safe when it doesn't. And the other is I asked the assistant district attorney on the phone, Well, are you going to require this of all parents in Fannin County? Because if you think it makes them more kids more safe, then every parent should be required to do this, not
Yeah.
just this parent. So what actually was said as far as the offer, and I'm quoting here, the assistant district attorney for Fannin County told me, quote, things have been developing on that case fairly rapidly, and I wanted to touch base with you about it because my current inclination on that case to do was I wasn't planning on filing an accusation because DFACS is putting in place a safety plan. Okay, so that's not an offer, and even if it was, it still would be turned down because it's suggesting, well, we won't prosecute you, which is the threat.
Right.
We won't prosecute you further if you agree to a safety plan. But if you violate the safety plan, now we've got you on violating a safety plan, which means DFACS can do many
Sure.
things, including come take custody of your child or investigate you further. So it's turning over one type of government oversight of you and your family completely unnecessary and unconstitutional for a different kind. But because you're agreeing to it, a couple of different things. One, it's acknowledging your arrest was likely appropriate, and secondly, is your child needs to be more safe, which again is an acknowledgement that's not true.
Right. So
Yeah, for me, that was the main thing, is that by signing it, then I'm saying that my parenting and that my home is not safe to begin with, and that's
right.
ridiculous.
Right. And so you don't want it, you're holding the line on your parenting. You did nothing wrong. Your parenting's good, is what you're saying. And you don't want to
Yeah.
be coerced into admitting otherwise.
I mean, I've managed to raise 4 kids into teenagehood, and one of them's almost grown. So, I mean,
Yeah.
if my home wasn't safe and my kids weren't well fed and cared for,
Yeah.
we wouldn't have made it
Absolutely.
this far.
As far as the thing goes, though, the app, it strikes me as just an attempt to almost look over her shoulder, right? Theoretically, I don't know if you use an iPhone or something. I happen to have an iPhone, but maybe Android has something similar. You can track an iPhone. So I can see, I have 3 kids. I can see where they are at any given time because we have that
Mhm.
enabled, right? So all that app is doing is just letting the government or letting the authorities look in on that. I don't see what.
And I don't think that's the case. David, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It didn't specify any type of tracking app. I don't think it was some kind of special government app that they have access to. I think it could have just been anything generic, like Life 360, or like you're saying, enabling it on Verizon.
Right. But it's giving, it's sharing, it's giving them. I get.
Yeah, I feel.
No, they didn't ask that be something that they could monitor. It was just 2 things. One, that she download some app and that they would watch her do it.
Mhm.
Look over her shoulder while she's putting this app or enabling the Find My Phone app on an iPhone. They're going to watch her to make sure she does it. And then the other was that she would have another person other than herself be designated as the guardian, adult person who would be responsible for knowing her child's whereabouts at all times. Now, they were not going to have that app where they could look in on it, but that doesn't matter. Again, that would be worse, of course. That'd make it more absurd, but it's not less absurd simply because they were going to make her do it.
Yeah. The whole thing sounds absurd to me, but that's just me.
Well, mainly it is because, like David said, I mean, it doesn't actually make anything safer. It's just an excuse for more government oversight and intrusion into your life. That's all that it is.
Absolutely.
It doesn't actually accomplish anything.
It just makes it easier for them to accuse you of something later. I guess if they find something that they see. Listen, you talked about raising your other kids, and one of them 16 years old now, and everything's been fine with them. I wanted to ask you sort of about your parenting philosophy. Do you, what you're doing? Do you hear this term free range parenting thrown around a lot? Do you feel like, is that what you're doing, or is it something close to that, or something not even close to that? How do you sort of describe your parenting
I mean, you
style?
can call it what you want. I guess that would kind of be an appropriate term. My husband and I have tried to raise our kids as close to the way that we were raised as possible. And we were raised in the 80s, so there was a lot of freedom and independence. Our parents didn't always know where we were every second. We'd be gone all day. So it's, we were raised to know how to do things and how to have street smarts and, not to talk to strangers and stuff like that. So that if we did want to go to the gas station and get an ice cream, we could do so safely. We knew how to cross roads. I was crossing huge intersections. I grew up in Florida. So, on my bicycle. So it was, we've just always, I guess had some nostalgia for that, because it seems like over the years that, the overarching parenting style, at least that you hear about the most, I don't know if it actually is the most popular or you just hear the most noise about it, but there seems to be a lot of people that just, hover over their kids constantly.
Yes. Helicopter parenting.
Yeah. And again, I don't know if that's factually the most dominant parenting style. Maybe it's just what we hear about the most, but, and it makes me wonder, because I have received so much support. I felt like if there weren't a lot more people that did raise their kids like mine, then I wouldn't be getting so much support. But yeah, again, it's speculation, but yeah, we've just always wanted our kids to, be able to go play in the woods, go ride your dirt bike, go, walk to the gas station and get an ice cream, all the things that we just love doing growing up. And that I personally feel like I learned my best lessons when I was out on my own with my friends or by myself, because that's just when if you come across something that you need to solve a problem, you got to solve it on your own. Your mommy and daddy aren't there to solve it for you. And that's a great learning experience.
Yeah, I think so.
So I don't know if you want to put a label on it, but we want them to be independent. We've never wanted our kids to not be able to be functional adults and contribute to society. So, even, at their ages now, they can all pretty much take care of themselves. They know how to feed themselves basic things. They're not gourmet chefs by any means, but they can eat, and fix themselves a meal. They know how to do laundry, they know how to do all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, so that's great. So it is working, and it's, I think too, some of it has to do with the kids. I think David alluded to this earlier. If you've raised your kids this way and they have a certain amount of wherewithal about them, then you're fine allowing them a little bit of latitude and a little bit of independence, right? Maybe if you're a helicopter, and actually I'm a parent, I try to avoid being a helicopter parent. I think it's a very easy thing to fall into, actually.
It is.
It's easy to just hover over your kids. And I see other parents do it. And I'm guilty of it myself at the playground and whatnot. Like, you see something happen and it's like you want to quickly run over and make sure everyone's okay. And then I've heard from other people like, hey, just back off and let them figure it out, themselves, because they need to learn that as a life skill, like you're talking about.
Hey, may I jump into
that trap?
May I jump in on this, Andrew? Because I think, at least from ParentsUSA's point of view, I want to note that we stand for the right of the parent to decide, unless the decisions about their children are causing actual harm. It's not a standard that I came up with. It's what the U.S. Supreme Court has been saying for 100 years or so, that parents have the right to decide for their children unless causing actual harm, long-term emotional harm, or significant physical harm. What does that mean? That means Brit can do what she's doing, but it also means that if you're a parent and you're, let's say, more protective of your children than others, you don't let your children running around at the playground on their own, you have to sit there and watch them the whole time. Other parents may criticize you and some parents may applaud you, but it's the right of you as the parent to your child to decide for your children and you. So again, in the range of overprotective, and overprotective again suggests there's something wrong with it, or not protective enough, suggesting there's something wrong with it. In the entire spectrum of parenting, it's only the extreme. If you lock your child up in a closet and never let them outside because you're afraid they're going to get hurt, or you let their kids roam around and they don't even come home and sleep they're 6 years old and they're sleeping out in the woods as if this is the year zero and you're in Sparta and you're teaching your child to fight with wolves. Sorry for the analogy and movie reference in my head. But that said, that's your right as a parent. So whether it's free range or not, now there are studies and indications that giving your child responsibility, giving them autonomy, letting them feel accomplished because they did something on their own without the parent walking them through every step of the way. It's like if you do the homework for your child, how much pride do they get out of you helping them versus you encouraging them and they figure it out and they come back and go, look what I did. So
Yeah.
again, we're
Yeah.
not about parenting. That's up to the parent.
And how much of the lesson do they actually learn if you do their homework for them, right?
Well, but I think it's important to point out, and I agree with David, it's not really any of my business how other people raise their kids. And I don't want to get involved with how other people raise their kids. I don't want any intrusion on my life, and I don't want to intrude on anybody else's life.
Right.
But unless it's absolutely necessary, like David was saying, extreme cases. But even, people that have more restrictive parenting styles than I do, you can still teach your kids those same lessons, of accomplishing things and gaining confidence and independence. So it's not like you have to be, all helicopter parent or all free range for your kids to be able to learn those things. You can consciously, provide those kids your opportunities if you feel the need to do so in a more protected environment. So I think there's lots of different ways to raise kids, and one of them's not necessarily right or wrong.
Britt, you talked about having some nostalgia and your husband as well for how you both were raised as kids. I'm wondering what your mom and dad think about what's happening here.
They think it's crazy. I mean, it's, I think sometimes we all fall into the trap of, oh, the world has changed. It's so much more dangerous now than it was then. Even though that's not true. And so, I think it's easy for even parents that used to allow their kids more freedom, that are now grandparents. They're like, oh, my grandkids, maybe shouldn't be doing those things because it's more dangerous. But for I mean, my mom obviously is, furious. And my dad's the same. When I told him, that I had been arrested, he was like, what? Are you serious? He thought I was joking too. He thought I was pulling a prank on him.
Yeah.
So yeah. And, even my extended family, my, cousins and aunts and uncles, I mean, they all just think it's just completely ridiculous.
Now, you're holding firm on not signing the safety plan. You're charged with reckless conduct. That carries a maximum penalty of 1 year in jail and a possible $1,000 fine. Are you prepared to go to jail over this?
Yeah, I don't think I will, but if I have to, then I will.
Wow. And you might not get the full year, right? That would be, I guess you would have to go to trial. David, step in here. Would this have to go to trial?
Yeah, look, I'm not the one that's facing criminal charges. I wasn't arrested. It's far easier for somebody who didn't have the orange jumpsuit, and I will test that's never happened in my life. I've never had handcuffs on me that I'm willing to talk about on air. But that said, thank you for laughing. I'll be here all week. That said, I'm not making light of this at all. I'm not the one facing criminal charges. And again, the public, the prosecutors, they haven't been through this. So to them, that's what they do. It's not going to happen, in my opinion, for a couple of reasons. And I can't 100% guarantee, but I can tell Brit with some degree of confidence in the arena of 99.9% that under the facts of this case, based on the reckless conduct statute that was declared unconstitutional as applied to parents, because, and let me explain to the people watching, it was declared unconstitutional by the Georgia Supreme Court because the statute doesn't give specifics about what you as a parent can and cannot do. It has this language that's all encompassing that if you consciously, and because Britt wasn't even aware of her son walking, so she wasn't aware, she wasn't consciously creating a situation in which he was at significant risk of harm. So none of those facts fit the way the statute's written, even if it hadn't been held unconstitutional. But the Georgia Supreme Court said it doesn't tell parents what you can and can't do. And because of that, in the case of 97, to give some context to it, a mother went out on a date for the evening. Now, where she was shouldn't have mattered. If she was at the emergency room with her elderly parent versus she was out on a date, we morally are judgmental as people, and we're going to go, oh my God, she shouldn't have left her 5-year-old at home. So this mom was out on a date, had her 5-year-old at home in the care of a 12-year-old half-brother. Something happened. The facts of the case aren't revealed, but the child died. Died. Okay. The outcome doesn't determine whether or not a crime was committed. So in Soren's case, nothing happened to him. But if a crime had been committed and nothing happened versus a child dies, doesn't again distinguish whether or not there's been a crime committed. But going back to 97, the Georgia Supreme Court said, as tragic as the outcome is, what did the mother do? She entrusted a 12-year-old to the care for her child. The reckless conduct statute doesn't say you can't do that. So considering that's what she did, that's not a crime. And secondly, so it's vague. And laws can't be so vague that it doesn't give fair warning that you might violate it. Secondly, it empowers law enforcement with too much discretion to weaponize, that term's been used in recent years, weaponize this statute in order to determine and claim anything is reckless conduct sufficient to arrest a person and to get a warrant and to have a prosecutor's office go forward with it. So it gives too much power to law enforcement and is vague. So my prediction is that the district attorney's office is not going to prosecute her. But by the way, that doesn't mean she's been declared innocent. An exoneration, a declaration by an official that she should never have been arrested and she's innocent is different than, keep in mind, I mean, whether we're talking about New York City in a subway, finding somebody not guilty is not the same as a declaration of innocence. And I've pointed this out a few times for those who remember the case in North Carolina of the Duke lacrosse team defendants criminally charged and prosecuted. The end of that case was the Attorney General for the state of North Carolina issuing a declaration of innocence of those criminal defendants, meaning it isn't just that they weren't guilty. Right. It's we're declaring them officially innocent. Right. And that's what should happen here. And that's what we're going to fight for. So
that's what you want. You want the declaration of innocence. You want, and that would that wipe the arrest from her record then? Because the arrest is currently on a permanent record, isn't that right?
Yeah, and you use the word permanent. Let me explain that again for the public. It's there permanently. It'll never go away. That means if she ever applies for a job with the government that requires a background search, the government can get access to that arrest record. Right. If she is arrested again for something, and let's say arrested even if it's a bogus charge yet once again, the arresting agency will have access to that arrest record. It happened before. If DFACS gets involved, DFACS likely would I'm not 100% sure of it, have access to it. The only thing that could happen, and this happens in many cases, where an arrest record is expunged or conviction is expunged, that means the public can't see it, an employer can't see it for a background search. If she's asked a question on an application, have you ever been arrested? She can honestly say no, because that arrest record and all will be sealed, except as to government agencies. And so it's always there.
Wow. And unless it's expunged, is what you're saying.
No, even if it's expunged, it just means it'll be sealed so that the public and employers and background searches won't be able to find it. But it's always going to be there, and it always will be available to government.
And I guess that goes for the mugshot too, and fingerprints.
Correct. Yeah. They don't take it and put it through a shredder or delete it, and then
even if they did it wouldn't matter. Everything's out on the internet nowadays. Yeah. Once this stuff is out on the internet, you're there forever.
So Britt, how would you
go away?
how would you feel if it came up like in a job interview or some sort of setting? And this is not, you have to answer that question about this. I feel like on some level, this almost might help you because it's so absurd, like this is,
I
yes,
don't know if I
was
want to go
arrested.
that far, but I mean, it's not something that I would be ashamed to have to explain because again, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't break any laws. And I'm happy to explain that to anybody, just like I am, doing these interviews. It would really be no different. Um, but yeah, I mean, it does, I mean, knowing that that's going to be there forever for any government organization, at least, is, frustrating because I feel like it's entirely too easy for, law enforcement to arrest you. And that's on your record forever. Like David said, I mean, at best, you cannot have to answer to the public for it, but you're always going to have to answer to the government for it. And even if you're found innocent. So it's hard for me to understand the imbalance there because it's so easy to do that to somebody's life with really very little effort at all. I mean, it took them no effort at all to get that arrest warrant to come arrest me. And now that's going to be on my government record forever. So,
yeah. So it sounds like the authorities that are making these decisions need to be a little bit more measured about some of the decisions they're making because of the effect that it has on somebody's life, especially like you, who is just a law-abiding citizen who's really not trying to bother anyone. Right?
Yeah. I mean, and not that it matters, but like, I don't even have a speeding ticket. I mean, it's about as squeaky clean as you get. But even if it wasn't, it doesn't matter. You should not be able to arrest somebody without a huge burden of proof that they've actually committed a crime and risk that being on their record forever.
Yeah.
It's just, and I don't understand why when something's expunged, when you're found innocent and it's expunged, why is it not expunged off government records too? I mean, that kind of boggles my mind. It's like you can never get away from it, no matter how innocent you are.
For real. Yeah.
Hey, only because I'm a lawyer and I feel obliged to throw this in there. There are differences in arresting somebody based on probable cause and some alleged violent crime has been committed and there's a public safety issue. So we want to arrest somebody we believe has committed a crime because we want them not to be able to commit another crime or to do more or escape us, get away, and the crime is significant. It's an assault, it's a murder, it's a sex crime of some heinous, well, I guess they're all heinous, a bad thing. So I want to say, we don't want to burden law enforcement with having to prove beyond a reasonable doubt at the arrest stage because it's an allegation. We believe a crime's committed. We need to get this person off the street. Now, let's contrast that with what happened here. A child is in town, without an adult nearby. He says he's okay, doesn't need any help, but we're going to escort him. We're going to drive him home, during which, by the way, you can get in a car wreck, which is the number one cause of injury or death to children in America is being in a car. Mm-hmm. Or if the deputy with the child in the back seat gets a call that says shots fired, officer down, that child's going to be driven into a active shooter situation. So under these circumstances, that shouldn't have happened. And then there's no reason to rush off and get an arrest warrant and come back hours later and arrest her. I mean, arrest her at her house in front of her kids. I mean, hey, call her up and say, hey, look, we really want you to come down. We got an arrest warrant. Can you get by here in the next couple of days? They clearly know from going to her home, she has kids. She has her father lives there. She's not going anywhere, right? So she's not escaping. So we have to go get her now. So let me clarify. Yes, I think there are occasions when law enforcement should go arrest people immediately. This isn't one of them.
Of course.
Not even close.
That's the point. That is the point. The facts of this case just did not call for what ended up happening.
Well, and I would agree with you, David, and thank you for clarifying that. I mean, obviously, crimes that are a threat to public safety or violent crimes, things like that, that's a little bit different situation. But I feel like, almost the same thing is applied in all situations, regardless of, I mean, I've said many times, I feel like they came and they got that arrest warrant so quickly. They had me in handcuffs and in the car in less than 5 minutes. Like I just robbed the store and shot three people. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's
Yes,
just, and that's all up to their discretion how they handle things. So David's 100% right. They could have handled that much better. They could have given me some warning, asked me to come down the station. I would have, I mean, I'm not a flight risk. So
absolutely. I mean, there's huge people who are accused of white collar crimes and whatnot who turn themselves in to federal
yeah,
agents and so forth, and that's
yeah.
all orchestrated behind the scenes and whatnot. That easily could have been done here
Mhm.
for what was the much.
Well, they could have done the perp walk, right? And had her walking in with media attention during the arrest. And for those, I'm sorry, I get no royalties from plugging the movie My Cunny Vision, Vinny. But at least Britt didn't get that question. Did you shoot the clerk? Her answer was, I shot the clerk. Um,
Yeah,
if you haven't seen the movie, watch it. But the point being, she's right. She didn't shoot anybody. She's not accused of shooting anybody. It's not even a crime. And if you're gonna if you're
yeah,
gonna get an arrest warrant, and be prudent about it. In fact, you don't even need to get an arrest warrant. As Britt has said, and I probably should let her explain it, when she saw the deputies knocking at her door, at her office door, the lower level of her house that has an exterior door with all glass, she had no idea she was being arrested. She thought, well, maybe as a courtesy, they came by just to see how everybody's doing and how was the little boy, almost 11, that they brought back. And so the idea that they're back 5 hours later with an arrest warrant and handcuffs and we don't have to tell you, explain anything.
yes,
When asked, the deputy, let's give her the benefit of the doubt, misspeaks and says, you're being arrested for reckless endangerment, and there is no such crime. She didn't say reckless conduct. Maybe, again, she misspoke. And then, Brett, I actually love the fact that you said the last time I checked, and I'll let you have the honor of sharing that if Andrew wants to
yes.
explore that exchange, which it's on the body cam. It's crazy.
Well, I
Yeah.
knew that it wasn't. That's why I asked that question. I know it's not illegal for a kid to walk to the store. I didn't know she was going to say what she did.
Which, yeah, I think she said something like
When
when they're
she
10
said
years
it is
old.
when they're 10 years
Yeah.
old, I mean, that was a very specific answer, you
Yeah.
And
know,
it's very specifically 100% incorrect
wrong. Yeah.
under Georgia law.
I
Well, isn't
figured
all
she might have said yes it is or something like that, but I was not expecting that specific of an answer.
isn't all that enough to get this case thrown out, though?
Yeah, by the way, keep you and the public, and again, very understandable. Get a case thrown out. She was arrested, fingerprinted, changed into a orange jumpsuit in front of a female deputy, had a body scan, um, and has been criminally charged for the charge not to go forward into the trial or the phase where am filing a motion, because I can't file my motion until they actually file their accusation, but she's currently criminally charged. Getting it, quote, thrown out doesn't change what has happened.
Of course. But I guess I was just sort of asking it from a legal standpoint. Isn't this going to be a very hard case for the district attorney to try to prove? And then, I mean, I guess it would go in front of a jury. Is that right? Like a jury of Brit's peers. Are they really going to convict when all of this is talked about in court?
If you don't mind, let me address that. And Britt, please, add your commentary however you wish to. But let me give you a couple pieces of information, Andrew. It would be reasonable for people to believe, well, they're not going to prosecute this. And I don't know whether they will or they won't. Britt doesn't either. This is hanging over her head, and she can address what that sense is that she and her family is feeling because the charges currently exist.
Yes.
They can do nothing and let the time clock, the statute of limitations, 2 years run out. They don't have to tell us they're doing that. They just let it linger for 2 years. I can't force their hand and make it happen sooner. the speedy trial demand that you hear about would not apply because it has the accusation, which is the word for indictment for a misdemeanor. It hasn't been issued. So they can do nothing. The cards are 100% in the hands of the prosecutor's office. They could issue the accusation. Why would they, you might ask, under these circumstances? Well, because they can. Because around the country, in liberal cities and in more conservative cities, you have prosecutors who don't take charges forward when law enforcement has arrested somebody, including some violent crimes, and you have those who do. So the relationship between the prosecutor's office and law enforcement is such, depending on where you are, that they will pursue every charge. Why? Because an officer arrested somebody, and if they don't go forward, they have a morale issue, or the sense that the prosecutor doesn't have their back. And hey, what's the worst thing that can happen? If they do prosecute and the judge grants a motion, or God forbid it goes to trial and they get a not guilty, nothing happens to the prosecutor. District attorney's office, they all have what's called absolute immunity. Nothing happens to them. So they have, other than they're spending taxpayer money, nothing happens to them. So they have no downside. So what's the prosecutor going to do? We don't know, and we can't predict. I can just tell you the idea of going in front of a jury is not as delightful as, again, most of us likely would think, oh, no parent's going to convict. And bear with me, because it's helping people understand this isn't just this one county or two counties in North Georgia or Waco, Texas, or Silver Springs, Maryland. There was another case in Maryland where a mother went and spent the night with her boyfriend. She had two children, ages 16 and 6. And she had the 16-year-old, plenty old enough to babysit and care for a 6-year-old overnight. The fact, again, that she wasn't at the hospital tending to her sick father versus she was spending the night with her boyfriend, from a moral point of view, there's actually been a study done. People give different answers to whether it was okay to do it or not based on what the mom was doing or the dad was doing. Not what they did, but why they were away. So in this case in Maryland, it's the mother, the 6-year-old woke up in the middle of the night, 16-year-old slumbering away. The 6-year-old walks out the front door, walks 2 miles down the road at 2 a.m., is found. Okay, 6-year-old 2 miles down the road at 2 a.m. Yeah, I don't mind police officers picking her up and bringing her home. But they arrested the mom and charged the mom, who wasn't even there, charged the mom with child endangerment under Maryland law. It went to trial. What do you think happened at trial?
Convicted.
She got convicted. Why? Because parents can be very judgmental of other parents.
Yeah.
She got convicted. But the good news is, on appeal, the Court of Appeals, referencing a David Pimentel, a law professor out of Idaho. I happen to know him. He wrote law review articles on this idea of holding parents accountable criminally. And the Court of Appeals in Maryland said, hang on a minute. What did the mother do? She entrusted a 16-year-old. The consequences of that are out of the control of the mother. The mother is not criminally liable for whatever did happen. So again, thankfully in this case, nothing happened to the 6-year-old. But if the 6-year-old had walked onto the railroad tracks at 2 a.m. and was run over by a train, the mother still is not criminally liable because she didn't do anything to cause the situation. So compare that to Brit. Brit didn't do anything that caused the situation when her child, on his own volition, walks out the door and walks down the street. So jury trial with parents, again, it would be overturned on appeal in Georgia, but I don't think it'll ever get there because I think the trial judge hopefully will do the right thing. And if not, it'll get in front of a court of appeals to review the facts to the law, to the Georgia Supreme Court case in 97 and the statute itself.
Yeah. Now, Britt, I want to talk about your story, as we mentioned, went incredibly viral. I mean, I feel like practically every news outlet covered it. Interestingly, in a strange coincidence, the same day, October 30th, the same day you were arrested was the same day that in New York, authorities broke in or, raided the home of a guy who had a little animal sanctuary on his property and killed Peanut the squirrel, who is the internet famous squirrel.
Wait,
And
wait. Didn't they also take the
the
raccoon?
raccoon, they killed the raccoon as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the raccoon wasn't famous. It was Peanut the squirrel who was famous.
Okay.
But my point, what I'm wondering is, what does all of this say about sort of government overreach in our current culture? I mean, do you have any opinions on that? How does this make you feel?
I'd say it's out of control. I mean, there's never any reason for that. Our property, our homes, our car, whatever our space and we have ownership of, it's supposed to be our sanctuary. And we're supposed to have some level of privacy and feeling of safety from government intrusion in those areas, especially. So yeah, for somebody, I mean, poor Peanut.
Yeah,
That's awful.
it is awful.
I mean, why did they have to kill him? I don't understand that story. That just blows my mind. And for them to come to my home like that when, I haven't committed a crime, I'm not a dangerous threat, and to put my children through that of my children have never had any experience like that. That was their first encounter with law enforcement. So you can only imagine how that's affected their feelings and the way they look at law enforcement officers. So, I mean, if their goal was to, traumatize my kids and to make them untrusting of law enforcement, then mission accomplished. Because, I mean, that's exactly what happened. Soren wouldn't go to any more of the high school football games because he said there was too many sheriffs there. And my own daughter has been very anxious driving, if she passes a police or if one just happens to get behind her in traffic, she just is automatically kind of filled with some anxiety, which definitely doesn't make her any safer when she's driving if she's feeling, increased levels of anxiety. So, and honestly, even for myself, I mean, especially those first few weeks, I mean, when I noticed that there was a sheriff that drove down my road several times, and I'm not used to seeing that. And of course, naturally, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, are they keeping an eye on me? And drive, so there's just all of this mental stuff that goes into it. And I like to consider myself pretty mentally tough. But even still, I'm not immune, to those kind of things. So,
sure. So it's definitely had an effect on the kids then. That's what I was wondering about Soren,
yeah.
especially.
Yeah.
He's the youngest, and since he was most intimately involved in this whole thing, but all the kids have had a negative experience from it sounds like. And
it's the same for them. Like David said, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, this could very well just hang over our family for the next couple of years. And, when there's that kind of uncertainty, it makes everybody nervous. I mean, every day for the first couple of weeks, the kids would ask me, what's going to happen? Are the charges going to get dropped? Like they want a resolution. They want to know. Kids crave security. And so they want to know what's going to happen. Are you going to go to jail? I mean, they asked me that for the first few days. Are you going to go to jail? My only answer was, I don't know.
Yeah.
So I can't offer my children any kind of definitive comfort and security regarding this right now because I don't have any. And all their friends know about it. I mean, I think it was right after the newspaper came out, maybe a week later, my oldest daughter, one of her friends sent her a picture of my mugshot and was like, is this your mom?
Okay.
I mean, so just all these little things, my son, everybody was asking him about it at school. And of course, they're all supportive, but still,
Sure.
Prior to this, I was a pretty private person. I don't, really put a ton of my life out there, and my kids are the same way. So for all of a sudden, for us to be, kind of out there and their friends and teachers, asking them about this stuff constantly, I just think the attention is a little bit much.
Yeah. It seems like a huge disruption to your lives.
Definitely.
Yeah. And then
Hey,
as far as I was going to ask too, just so it's like sort of an emotional disruption and just a disruption to everyday life. But what about even from a financial basis? Like, do you have to pay legal fees now? I know there's a GoFundMe out there to try to help you with this, but
fortunately, there has been a lot of financial support via the GoFundMe. So hopefully I won't have to come out of pocket for any legal fees, but I mean, that's what I thought initially I was going to have to do. And I was ready to mortgage all my property to do that
Oh my
because
God. Yeah.
I mean, I was not going to back down even before I talked to David. And my mom was completely on board because we own a couple properties together. And she was like, yeah, she's like, we're going to fight this. So, I mean, that was the limit that I was willing to go. And I don't have a ton of property. It's not like I'm, I'm not wealthy or anything. I'm just middle class, but
Yeah.
but
You don't want to go broke fighting this, right?
Well,
yeah,
let me address that. One of the reasons I started Parents USA in 2013 was because I'm an attorney. I just noticed more and more the overreach of government. Let's use that phrase. It's true. Trial courts, law enforcement, DFACS, by whatever it's called in different states, CPS, the overreach. Yes, there's a role for government, but there's so much overreach. And just like in the case in New York with Peanut and I think it's Fred the raccoon, the amount of resources wasted unnecessarily is sinful. We should be upset about it as taxpayers. So what happened here in Brit's case? Well, we have a deputy who rolls up and quote finds Soren in town, minding his own business. That deputy should have gone, report back to dispatch. I found the kid. He seems fine. Nothing to see here, and driven away. No, no, no. Got to get on the phone, call mom, talk to the kid, ask him questions. They ask him questions like, have you had anything to eat today? Well, you didn't stop him because he looked emaciated. So why are you even asking? Because they're looking for something to charge the mom with or the dad with. So here are the resources. So the time, another deputy. There are two deputies now. Well, go patrol the neighborhoods. That's Fannin County. You have the entire county to worry about. Why are two deputies with this boy along the street? Well, because they can't. Well, then they drive him home. So that's another, they're burning county gas and they're putting wear and tear on the vehicle. And then they fill out a report and then they go get an arrest warrant and then they arrest her and then she's processed at the jail and then DFACS gets involved. All of that consumes time, energy, and resources of government that could be allocated, directed, focused on kids who are actually being hurt, kids whose parents are on drugs and not able to care for them. And yet, what do we find year after year after year? Law enforcement and DFACS begs the government, we need more. We need more money. And this is true around the country. What we need to do is have our government realize, hey, we can cut some waste. Maybe the county, Fannin County or state of Georgia needs a Department of Government Efficiency. I don't know, I've heard that term lately. And realize one way we can cut waste is to quit pursuing parents who are doing nothing wrong. If you as a law enforcement officer believe, yeah, I wouldn't let my kid walk down here, great. Don't let your kid walk down here, but you're not empowered to take your moral judgment or your judgment and views as a parent and impose it without the backing of the legislature on parents on a day-to-day basis. There you go. Off my soapbox. But this is why we do. And so, no, Britt, when she called me from day one, I didn't need to ask her what are her resources because Parents USA exists to help her and other parents. Give you the flip is I mentioned the mom in Waco, Texas. It's Heather Wallace. She did an interview with John Stossel. I flew up to New York to participate and be by her side because she wouldn't do it without me, her and her husband Scott. But that said, she got arrested, as I mentioned earlier, prosecuted, and hired an attorney, paid $7,000, and then the attorney said, well, if you want to go to trial and not take their pretrial diversion offer, which required her to write a letter of apology acknowledging she shouldn't have done what she did, letting her child walk home from school on the sidewalk. And they made the decision they couldn't afford it, and she went ahead with the pretrial diversion. Afterward, she contacted Parents USA, and I had to break the news to her. Because you did that, withdrawing your plea when you had an attorney would be impossible. and you can't go after the people who arrested you. Why? Because you acknowledge you did something wrong. So yes, it is an imposition on parents who get arrested who believe, so they capitulate, they go along, they sign the safety plan, they plead guilty and get some plea deal of parenting classes, pay a fine, be on probation. This happens routinely because not everybody has the wherewithal, as Brit did, to do a little research, find us, and engage us. And yes, there are donations, and the public's been very generous. That goes to help our overhead and pay for our staff and people to help Brit and cover her legal expenses. Absolutely. But also helps cover the legal expenses in the cases that don't have the media attention, don't grab the attention of other parents. I mean, this year alone, we filed 3 amicus briefs with the U.S. Supreme Court. The printing costs alone, because the U.S. Supreme Court requires printing still, even in 2024, have been $10,000 worth of printing costs alone. Yeah. So the idea is she's helping us be empowered and funded to help other parents and also to help her without any cost to her and her family. Yeah. Any financial cost. I mean, absolutely. Her time, her energy, and her emotional, sure. I'm not the one that's
sure the emotional toll that it's taking, but why should it take a financial one as well? That's important. I wonder, David brought up Department of Government Efficiency and government overreach. Britt, I'm sort of wondering what you think about where we're headed as a country. We've got a new president-elect. They're talking about reforming a lot of how we spend, how we allocate our priorities and spend taxpayer money. Do you think we're headed in a better direction now? Maybe this stuff happens. It seems like it's happened under maybe all administrations, but I always, a good friend of mine often says, culture is downstream of politics. So do you think that this could help things in the future so that maybe someone else like yourself doesn't go through this?
Well, David's a lot older than me, so he can. I'm not going to mess this up, David. Calm down.
Oh, okay.
David's a lot older than me, so he can probably tell you that.
Thank you for pointing that out.
This has happened under many presidencies, Democrat, Republican. Yeah. It doesn't matter. I mean, these kinds of things have been happening for decades now, I'm sure. So, well, obviously, 1997. How long ago was that? When the law. So, I don't think the issue is really a political one. I personally, regardless of who's in office, think that anytime we can cut out waste, it's just like running your own household budget. If we can cut out waste and not, spend $30 billion researching something ridiculous and instead put that towards something useful, I think that's always a win, regardless of what president's in office or who has control of Congress. So I'm always a fan of that.
Yeah, let me point out that all of this is under state law. So state by state by state. In fact, there's some legislation I'm working on that I'd like to have Georgia be a national leader enacting a protocol that law enforcement is required to follow so that if there's a child, quote, unattended, that the dispatch 911 operators required to ask, whoever the concerned person is, because we can be critical of the woman who called this in to 911 and say, what was she thinking? She didn't need to do that. Okay, let's just give her slack and say maybe she was concerned, maybe her concern was unreasonable, but she can call it in. It's up to law enforcement to create thank you for your call, but we're not going to do anything, because 911, for those who don't know, they get calls from people who are upset because their pizza didn't get delivered on time. All right. Okay. Now, we have to believe law enforcement doesn't dispatch a deputy to go to the pizza place and say, hey, where's Mrs. Jones' pizza? She ordered it an hour ago. They don't do that. So what's the line? I would like to create a bright line so that the questions from dispatch are to the caller, thank you for your call. Does the child appear to be hurt? Absolutely. Should be asked every time. Well, 2 reasons. One, if he's not hurt, maybe we don't need to do anything. Secondly, if he is hurt, we need to send an EMT and not only a deputy trained in first aid or not. EMT is more equipped to handle an injury. So let's ask, child appear to be hurt? If the caller says no, move to question 2. Child appeared to be in distress. What do you mean by that? Well, is he crying? Does he look scared? Is he curled up in the fetal position? Is he hiding behind something? Does he look like he's trying to he or she's trying to get away? Um, oh no, he just kind of whistling a happy tune, walking in and out of a Dollar General. Okay, well, third question. Is there an identifiable risk of imminent significant harm, such as an open construction site that the child's walking into, not that's a block away? Is there a swimming pool, not on the other side of the fence, but the child is inside of the fence of an empty or filled swimming pool, and the child appears to be too young to be near a swimming pool without a lifeguard or somebody nearby? Or is there hypothetically the sketchy person in a white van hanging out the window with candy and a puppy? And by the way, for viewers who are concerned about a child could be abducted at any time, Lenore Skenazy with letgrow.org is the website, is quoted as saying you would have to have your child unattended, unsupervised for 750,000 years before it's likely your child would be abducted. So the fear of something could happen paralyzes parents. Worse, that unfounded, unreasonable fear causes law enforcement to believe they have to do something. And I want statute to say, no, you don't. Follow this protocol. And if you do, you are granted immunity from civil or criminal liability if something 20 minutes later, 10 minutes later happens after you make these three observations. And hey, by the way, if you don't follow the protocol, you do pick up the child, you do arrest the parent, you do turn it over to CPS, parents have a private cause of action against you because you shouldn't have done it.
Yeah. Gives them some recourse in these cases. Yeah.
I think it's a great law. I think it's kind of crazy that we have to consider having laws saying that kids can walk to the gas station, but that's just kind of where we are culturally. Yeah. But, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, what'd you say, 750,000 years? I think I read a statistic somewhere that said boys are like, 3 times less likely to get abducted or kidnapped than girls. Like there's quite a disparity I read somewhere between boys and girls. So for a boy, it would be like, 1.5 million years or something. Either way, it's crazy. I
don't think we need, but I think you're correct on the stats. But the most important message I'd like viewers to have is if your concern is about abduction, I'm a parent and I would also have my concern. But my concern for my child is between me and my child and his mother and should not involve law enforcement. And if you, as a concerned person, want to come up to me after I drop my child off at the park and I drive away and go, why are you leaving? Something could happen to your child who's playing at the park. And we have those cases. There's a mom in South Carolina who's working at a McDonald's and no culprit. And her child, she had to bring with her every day to work, and her bored 9-year-old sat there during holidays or vacations from school. And so the mom is like, okay, you have a phone. I'm going to leave you at the park, play at the park. I'll pick you up when my shift ends. That mom ended up in trouble with CPS because her 9-year-old was at the park and no adult was with her. That's absurd. The fear that we're letting run our society, and it wasn't by the way, to my knowledge, Peanut and Fred were not rabid, as in they had some disease and I was worried about biting somebody. But we've given government so much power and authority and large budgets. I don't know if it's out of boredom or just an over sense of authority and power, and I can do something, so I'm going to act, when sometimes the most important thing to do, including as a parent, yes, you can dive in and help your child with something, but you know what? You have to show the restraint to say, no, I'm better. It's better for my child if I don't rescue them from the school teacher or from their homework or from a bully or something. You figure out when and where to do it. That's fine. Again, you have the freedom to make a choice in either direction. law enforcement has so much power. Look at what they've done to this family unnecessarily, unnecessarily. And it can't be undone. That's kind of the point. It doesn't get undone simply because, quote, they drop the charges or don't pursue the charges.
Right. And really what you want is the declaration of innocence. But even that doesn't, as you mentioned before, doesn't fully undo all this.
It's always on social media. That arrest record's always going to be there for, police and government authorities. So yeah, it never will fully go away.
Yeah. So Britt, you've said that you actually would be prepared to go to jail for all this if it comes to that, which hopefully it doesn't. But what as we wrap up here, I'm wondering what final message do you have to people? What do you want to tell to basically the country at large who's interested in this, and then other parents who are out there maybe in a similar situation or maybe don't want to get in a similar situation?
I think the most important thing is for us to just continue having these conversations, because that is the way that our culture has gone, is believing that it's so much more dangerous now than it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago for kids to have independence. And factually, it's not true. And so I think just that alone, just spreading that awareness and trying to, stem some of this fear that we have. So David brings up a good point. Most dangerous place your kid or anybody can be is in a car. Yet we do that every day without even batting an eye. We don't even think about it,
yep. Right?
We let our kids get in cars and drive around themselves when they, so this is something that's so ingrained in our culture. Oh, well, everybody drives, it's just something we do that nobody really thinks about how dangerous it is. Yet something that, I got a better chance of winning the lottery or getting struck by lightning. We have this overwhelming fear that, there's pedophiles on every corner and they're just waiting in shadows to snatch your kids. The disparity between the two, I think, is something that we just need to spread awareness of, that, because there's a lot of parents, I think, it's a twofold thing. They're either living in fear of that happening, or they're living in fear of other people's judgment of them because they don't believe in that. And so as a parent, it's very stressful being a parent right now, one way or the other. You either think your kid's going to get snatched, or you think somebody's going to, report you to Child Protective Services because you don't think your kid's going to get snatched. So it's just a very stressful time to be a parent, and it's hard enough as it is. So I just want to make it easier on parents and give them the freedom to make those choices that they think are best for their families, even if it's different than what I would choose to do.
Absolutely. Well, Britt, let me say, I wish you nothing but good luck in getting this case reversed, getting the declaration of innocence. That would be justice, I guess, or as close as you're going to be able to get to justice in this case. So I hope that you can put this behind you for the sake of you and your family at some point. And I thank you for coming on and talking about this. It was really interesting to hear your side of it and to hear about how it's affected you and your family. And David, thank you for all the legal analysis and for making sure Britt didn't say anything that would jeopardize this case for her.
Not worried about Britt saying anything at all. And I appreciate the opportunity. I would encourage those who are watching to read up on her case and more at our website, ParentsUSA.org, parents with an S, ParentsUSA.org. And if you would, commit to donating $5 a year or $5 a month or some amount, because it is what allows us to help the other parents receive. We get, not only because of this case, but we get emails every day asking for help and assistance in different types of cases, and we provide some direction or assistance from merely legal advice to actual participation as advocates. We become their lawyers, or we file amicus briefs supporting appeals that parents make to appellate courts in Idaho, Wisconsin, Georgia, the U.S. Supreme Court. We have 2 new appeals right now that started. One's in Savannah, Georgia, one's in Duval County, Florida. So we have all these other cases, and again, they don't bring much media attention or any, or we don't really seek it. It comes to us through some cases. So I would just ask, there are nonprofits, many people are quite charitable, they support other nonprofits. Give thought to redirecting or adding to your charitable contributions and assisting this 501c3 nonprofit. And I appreciate Brit's willingness to be public about this because her being out here allows us to spread the word about the organization and the work we do and why parents are under assault across the board in many situations. A child unattended is only one of the many areas in which government overreaches.
Yeah. Well said,
Yeah.
David. And Britt, there's also the GoFundMe out there for you. And just to echo David's point, it seems like you've been fearless through all of this, and hope that you can have the strength to continue to be that way going forward.
I don't know about fearless. I'm human. I have fear. Just
Yeah.
resilient, I
Yeah,
think is a
resilient.
better word. I've planted my feet firmly in what I believe, and so I'm going to see it through. But David brings up a really good point. You know, this is a more of a broader topic of not just about parents. It's just about government overreach in general. And the only way that's ever going to change is if we push back, and we can only push back with funds. So David can only do these things with money. So the idea of just, donating $5 a month, $10 a month, I mean, that can go a long way towards helping to fight against these cases. And the more precedent we set by winning these cases, the better this problem will be for everybody. Hopefully, the less it will happen, the more that the government realizes that there's going to be pushback, because it's scary. It's scary to have them threaten to take your children away. That's very scary. It's very scary to be threatened with jail time. Just because I say I've planted my feet and I'm willing to do that doesn't mean I'm not afraid of it. So it's no wonder that, a lot of people just don't push back because they are scared. But if you have somebody like David on your side that's, giving you that confidence, hey, you did nothing wrong. We can fight this. You stand a good chance. Like he said, nothing's definitive, but you stand a good chance. He's given me a lot of confidence to keep going and doing this. Because I'm not a lawyer. I didn't know exactly what the law was and things like that. So what he's doing is important, very important.
Yeah.
And give us 2 more minutes, because I think
Yeah.
this is a really important point Britt brought up about the power of government to threaten to take your children away. For those who haven't seen the body cam video of her arrest, it's significant that the 2 deputies there putting her in handcuffs did not ask her, how old are your other children? Because her answer would have been 12, 14, and 16, which according to the Division of Family and Children Services in Georgia are plenty old enough to be left alone. And also the 16-year-old can care for younger siblings for up to 12 hours. Again, these are guidelines. I actually don't like the idea of government saying, oh, you're allowed to, because you shouldn't need permission. Beyond that, the adult, her father, the grandfather, is also at the home where they left Soren early. The deputies left Soren earlier in the day, where he was the only person home, was the grandfather. Yet, when they're arresting her, they ask Britt this question: other than your grandpa, the grandpa, is there another adult here? And Britt's answer was no. And within a millisecond, that deputy throws out, then we're just going to have to call DFACS to come get your kids.
Yeah.
What? You're going to get DFACS to come pick up my kids and take them into DFACS custody, foster custody, while you're arresting me? That, I mean,
Yeah, that's insane.
that should send chills up every parent's back, because that's the threat. If you don't sign the safety plan, we're taking your kids away. If you don't do what we tell you, we're going to take your kids away. That is the threat that every parent will bring virtually every parent to their knees. Fortunately, what happened was they ended up calling her mother, who lived a short distance away, was away from her home, but was back very quickly, and that didn't happen. But those words, I don't know, Britt, I don't think I've heard you describe.
I'm kind of shaking a little bit now thinking about it. I know you can't see that on camera, but it makes me furious every time I think about how easily and how carelessly that was thrown out there. like David said, it was within a millisecond. She didn't even think about the consequences of what that might mean. It was a threat, plain and simple, and it was just very easily thrown out there. And that's scary that there's law enforcement people out there that feel confident and comfortable with just throwing that out there like it's nothing.
Yeah, that has to be terrifying, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And
it was terrifying. When
Yeah.
she said that, it was terrifying because my kids are not going into government custody. That is not going to happen. They're not going into foster care. That is probably one of my biggest fears when I have so much family around, to threaten to come take my children out of their home and throw them into foster care. That was infuriating.
Yeah.
And so luckily David's right. I was able to call my mom and she wasn't far, but if that wouldn't have been the case, like people that don't have a good support system and lots of family around, they would have come and taken those kids and they would have put them in foster care.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Why your father was there. So why was that not sufficient for you? I mean,
you're asking the wrong person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if they said that.
I don't know. I mean, my father does have a physical disability. He is in a wheelchair, but I don't think that disqualifies him from, there's people in wheelchairs that have children. Yeah. So I don't think there's any reason for that to disqualify him. For whatever reason, the law enforcement officers didn't, think that they should be left with him. I can't speculate as to why they thought that.
I mean, that, I know that you're charged with reckless conduct. That just seems a little reckless to me.
Well, and David says my 16-year-old daughter is old enough to watch the others. My 14 and my 16-year-old children are old enough to watch other children. Yes. Right. Per DFACS guidelines, that starts at 13 in the state of Georgia. Right. So actually 2 of my older children were old enough to stay and watch. So,
and let me add, so the other part, remember earlier I said that the deputy apparently didn't bother considering the danger to Soren, almost 11, to be in the backseat of the car being driven home. They obviously also don't consider the damage and hurt that it would cause children to be taken into custody by DFACS while they arrest their mother in this case. This notion that they're there to protect and serve, we're helping this child who is so in danger, which he wasn't, and we're going to arrest the mom, and now we're going to put all 4 kids into state custody while she's being arrested because that's better for them. And yes, if you don't hear the sarcasm in my voice, let me assure you that's nothing but steeping in sarcasm because that's absurd. But that's the power of government, which is why we want to push back and make this stop. So the next, and that's 99% of why I think Brit's doing this is not just standing up for herself and her family, but she wants to help make it stop for other parents so they don't have to go through this, because a different family, those kids would have been in state custody, terrified, wondering, why am I here? How long am I going to be here? And not knowing, and it's just horrifying.
Yeah, I can imagine to those kids, it might almost feel like they're getting arrested in addition.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, again, Brit, you're standing up for parents everywhere doing this.
I'm trying to.
It's admirable that you're doing that, and David, that you're helping her through this. Anything else you want to add there?
No, just thank you for your time and for, spreading this even more, because I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, I'm telling you, as a parent myself, it's scary just how, just at a whim, this all can happen so quickly. So I feel that personally. Thank you for doing what you're doing. I'm sorry you have to be in this situation, but the way you're handling it is admirable for sure.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, and thanks for coming on. It was really just interesting talking to you too, and hearing about your experience and your side of this story. So hopefully it all goes well, or as well as it can for you after this. But thanks again for coming on, and best wishes to you.
Thanks.